And so I do think there are organizations that understand that there's this desire for badness,
Right.
that if they pitch it the right way, they can tap into it and find consumer demand and consumer fandom and maybe a little bit of virality too.
But using the Labubu doll example, when you think about retail, isn't there kind of like a historical pattern? Like you will see companies come up with these items that seemingly you would think have no real connection, but for some reason there's a virality to them, and it just connects with a group of consumers.
Yeah, and I think what you're also suggesting is that sometimes so bad it's good phenomena become fads, right? That they suddenly burst onto the scene. Everybody has to have one. They become social, cultural capital as well. They create a sense of community or, sort of shared storytelling. Those kinds of things definitely happen. But I do think sometimes, fads aren't always so bad they're good, right? There are lots of fads that are just good, not necessarily bad. And so I do think there's a long-running history of these kinds of, maybe even going back to, my childhood with the pet rock, right? Which was maybe so bad it was good in the same way.
Welcome to The Ripple Effect, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the minds of Wharton faculty. I'm your host, Dan Loney, and in each episode, we'll be diving deep into the inspiration behind the groundbreaking research that Wharton professors have conducted and exploring how their findings resonate with the world today.
Why is it that we tend to like things that may be perceived to be bad for us, or maybe things that the public at large don't like? Whether it be a TV show or a song that just doesn't resonate with the public. Well, some research has taken a look as to why that is, that there aren't times when we like things that maybe aren't the best. Patti Williams is a marketing professor and vice dean here at the Wharton School and part of the research into this, and she joins us here in studio. This has got to be one of those fun research topics to look at because it's so interesting that I think we perceive everything to be, we want to know why things are the best. This is why maybe they're not the best.
Yeah, it's such a fun project. Thank you for having me here to talk about it, Dan. And I'm going to just give a shout out. This work was done actually with two Wharton doctoral students who've now gone on, and they are professors of marketing on their own at USC at the University of Colorado. And this project really came about because we were discussing, why do people like things like Tommy Wiseau's The Room? People aren't supposed to like bad things. They know it's bad. It's not like they think it's good. Everybody knows it's bad, and yet they still like it. And so we started thinking about this and looking into the research. And what we found is there really wasn't any research that articulated or even discovered that people might like things that they themselves objectively find poor quality, let alone explaining why that might happen. So we set about trying to understand what might be driving this.
So when you say bad for us, what exactly do you mean?
Yeah. So we really mean things that you yourself know are bad, not things that maybe you think are bad, but I think are good. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I like them. But within my own sort of range of preferences, I could choose to, hear a really good joke. I could choose to hear a mediocre joke, or I could choose to hear what is a really bad womp womp joke. And what we find pretty consistently, we find what I'm going to call a J-shaped pattern. In general, people prefer the best things over mediocre or bad things. Okay. But what we find also is that, in general, people prefer bad things over mediocre things. So I'd rather hear a bad joke than just an in-between joke. But of course, I'd rather hear a good joke most of all.
So are there elements of this then that you connect to the retail sector and in things that we like or maybe we shouldn't like?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the biggest trends right now, I think, is an example of so bad it's good. I don't know. Do you have a Labubu doll?
I do not, but I have heard about them.
I don't have one either, but I keep seeing them. And now that the students are back on campus, I've noticed several hanging from backpacks as they're walking through campus. I think Labubu is so bad it's good, right? They're these sort of slightly ugly, mischievous, but charming little things. And why do we like them? I don't know, just because they're a little bit crazy and a little bit out there. And they're just kind of fun to explore their eccentricities and their maybe a little bit of the collector culture that comes into.
How do you think then this type of attitude by the consumer then potentially impacts the companies that are involved in either producing this product or producing the song or bringing forth an item that maybe is not perceived by everybody to be the best?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I do think there are some organizations that understand that this is happening. I'll give you an example. One of the studies that's reported in the paper, and we ran many, many more studies that aren't actually reported in the paper, was looking at people's enjoyment of auditions from So You Think You Can Dance.
Okay.
And what we found is that people really love the best auditions.
Sure.
And then they love the worst auditions.
Sure, yeah.
And I think shows like that really know that that's the case. They show you some really good ones and they show you a few really, really bad ones where the person who's auditioning is really trying. There's an earnest sincerity about it, but they're just not really good. And they tend not to show us very many mediocre ones. And so I do think there are organizations that understand that there's this desire for badness,
Right.
that if they pitch it the right way, they can tap into it and find consumer demand and consumer fandom and maybe a little bit of virality too.
But using the Labubu doll example, when you think about retail, isn't there kind of like a historical pattern? Like you will see companies come up with these items that seemingly you would think have no real connection, but for some reason there's a virality to them, and it just connects with a group of consumers.
Yeah, and I think what you're also suggesting is that sometimes so bad it's good phenomena become fads, right? That they
Right.
suddenly burst onto the scene. Everybody has to have one. They become social, cultural capital as well. They create a sense of community or, sort of shared storytelling. Those kinds of things definitely happen. But I do think sometimes, fads aren't always so bad they're good, right? There are lots of fads that are just good, not
Right.
necessarily bad. And so I do think there's a long-running history of these kinds of, maybe even going back to, I don't know, my childhood with the pet rock, right? Which
That's
was
right,
maybe
yeah,
so bad
yeah.
it was good in the same way.
You talk in the paper about the importance of quality in making these decisions and why that's important. Explain that.
Yeah, we really mean a couple of things. One is that we're not looking, again, at things that you might think are bad, but which I think are good. We're looking at my own objective sense of quality. I really am choosing something that I think is not very good, but consuming that not very good thing is pleasurable in and of itself.
Right.
The other thing we look at in the paper is, when and why might people make these kinds of choices? We don't always choose the bad thing. We often choose the good thing instead, right? And we find that you're more likely to choose something that's so bad it's good when you're consuming for hedonic motives rather than utilitarian motives. You don't want a bad vacuum.
Right.
You want a good vacuum.
Right.
But you're willing to watch a bad movie maybe over a mediocre movie, right? And so a more hedonic motive, a more entertainment motive lends itself to this kind of consumption.
Is it safe to say then that the decision to like it is very individual to that person? It may be very different depending on who you're talking to.
Yes and no. So we definitely found some things that we could reliably get everybody or most everybody in the study to think they were so bad they were good.
Right.
We could find So You Think You Could Dance auditions that everybody agreed were bad but deeply entertaining.
Right.
We could find jokes that everybody said, man, that's the worst dad joke I've ever seen, but it still made me laugh. But it's also the case that one of the things we discovered is that the things that you think are so bad they're good might look different than the things that I think are so bad they're good. And so there is a lot of heterogeneity in what counts as so bad it's good. There's also, it's not here in the paper, but we also think that there's a lot of social capital. So subgroups might decide that this is an example of something that's so bad it's good, whereas another subgroup really doesn't agree with that at all. I just think it's bad. I don't think there's any goodness to it, right? And so it's a little bit of an individual difference and a little bit of a sort of socio-cultural difference that sits there too.
So you mentioned this in the scope of the entertainment industry. Is there something that kind of connects us to this mindset within entertainment? Obviously, there are other areas, but it seems like entertainment would have maybe the greatest opportunity to see this play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that's true both intentionally and inadvertently, right? I think some of these things, like Rebecca Black's Friday, was intended to be good. And it turned out that people were like, wow, this is bad, but I love it, right? So I think it goes back to the motives that people bring to so bad it's good consumption that seems to align with entertainment-related consumption. people are in a hedonic mindset versus a utilitarian mindset. Now, we actually did, and we looked at this with something like a documentary. People don't want to watch a bad documentary.
Sure.
They'd rather watch a mediocre documentary than a bad one. A bad one is just bad. It's not so bad. It's good for the most part. So when I have a more utilitarian motive versus a hedonic motive, I'm just more interested in goodness than badness. When I'm more interested in just pleasure or just having fun, and importantly, we find when the consumption of it is pretty inconsequential. It's not going to ruin my life. It's not going to cost me a lot of money. There's not a lot of risk associated with it. Yeah. So I think that's why you see it in the realm of entertainment. It's an hour on TV or 10 minutes on YouTube.
Right.
Or, a couple of days of reading a book. It's costless in some way.
I was going to say it's probably a minute on like Instagram or X or one of those platforms,
Even
because
less.
it kind of goes back to the virality of it. With us having such a connection on social media to all of these different things and posts being up there all the time, that it almost sees, I would think that there's an opportunity to even see this, it's so bad it's good, expand even further as we move forward here.
Yeah, I think that's right. It won't surprise me to see that a lot of so bad it's good things are really viral. And I think they're also really relevant to the moment. I've been reading a lot about metamodernism, and I don't know if you've ever read about metamodernism. It's sort of a response to postmodernism and sort of the cynicism of postmodernism. And it's really, really relevant to our students at the moment. I find them walking in with what I will call a metamodern sort of perspective.
Right.
Metamodernism is really this oscillation between hope and irony and a recognition that things can bring both of these things. It comes with this deep desire for authenticity, but also a little bit of that postmodern cynicism that the world really isn't all that we thought it might have been.
Right.
And I think that a lot of these so bad it's good things kind of sit right in this space, right? There's the irony of this thing is, man, it's terrible, but there's some earnest sincerity in its creation. It's got its own charm. And so I think that the idea of so bad it's good has a lot of cultural resonance at the moment and is likely to be associated with things that just catch fire in culture.
I saw that you mentioned after being involved with the research that there were a few questions kind of left to be answered.
Yeah.
Those what areas?
Oh gosh, so many good questions. And I should say this paper, ultimately got published with just a handful of the studies and the kinds of mechanisms we looked at. Here we looked mostly at like entertainment value. We also had some studies where we looked at curiosity, and we definitely find that sometimes people are more curious about bad things. What is it that makes it bad? In what way is it bad? And so maybe there's a curiosity mechanism that sits here. We think that maybe there's some storytelling value with things that are bad. What am I going to tell you a story about this mediocre hamburger that I just ate? But if there's a great story to tell about the worst hamburger I ever ate in my life, right? And so there might be other drivers besides sort of hedonic motives or, entertainment value that drive this kind of behavior. And then I think there's some interesting questions around the role of irony. What does irony play here? Am I consuming something like a Labubu for its ironic factor, right?
Right.
And there is a little bit of research on ironic consumption. And so how does this differ from just consuming the irony of this thing?
Right.
A little bit. So many, many other things that I hope other people might pick up and investigate.
Patti, great to see you again. Thanks very much.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Patti Williams, marketing professor in Vice Dean here at the Wharton School.
Thank you for listening to The Ripple Effect. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review so that we can continue to bring you the best insight from the Wharton School.